We are live. Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, and loving life. We've got Russ up here with us again. We're going to go over the next part of the brief that we've been talking about. And before we get started, I want to make sure that everybody comprehends as we go over this review tonight that once again, I explained I'm not doing this for any kind of compensation. Everything I need to know is what I've been researching before me, and it's just merely a matter of correcting the records. In that remuneration, as it applies, there is no remuneration. It's just merely the fact that when we correct the records, there are going to be remainders that would be objectively and subjectively, reasonably and logically, just automatically revert back to the one that put it into the system to begin with. Again, it's what you put in shall return. This is how we make those circulations of credit really creditable. So again, that's Deuteronomy 15 in whole, where it speaks that the Lord's release is 7 years, and that we are truly the lenders unto the nations. And as we correct these records, we're not to walk away with nothing. They're supposed to be allowed to give us back what actually belongs to us is as a matter of that birthright. Pure and simple. We're separating the manual from the spiritual. We're coming forth with those meritorious actions that we've been supposed to be doing all of our lives. But we at one point in time, again, as I've posed many times, there comes a point in your life where you got to realize you're full-grown boys and girls now. And there are certain things that you must admit. Otherwise, you live on in that insanity. And so when it comes to realizing that you've been living your life wrong and that you've been the fucking fool all your life, that you've been the bitch ass slave, there comes a time that you have to admit that to yourself. You don't need to look for somebody else to tell you that, to repeatedly tell you that you're fucking up 94 cases. You don't need that. At some point in time, it's time to wake up and say, okay, well, what the fuck am I doing wrong? Instead of continually pointing your finger at everybody else as if though it's their problem. You might be a problem for them, but what they're doing is because you're a problem. Think about that. And I'm not saying there's any fault anywhere. Everybody's a problem. We have this failure connecting the spiritual side because everything's been so ingrained and indoctrinated us in the manual bullshit. So greetings, Russ. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. Couldn't complain. A little tired, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, amen. All right, well, with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we do, I want to remind everybody once again, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. There's also a couple PayPal links down there for anybody that wants to share some love. And the StreamYard link is there for anybody that wants to join the panel. Tonight, we're going to talk about an EOIR as it relates to the representation of that calendar hearing we were talking about, the merits hearing. And this is the Executive Office of Immigration Review. Again, I firmly believe that this is the office we're supposed to be going to because it's the Department of Justice that we're looking at. And again, if we want justice, we've got to bring the justice. If we want equity, we got to bring the equity. U.S. Department of Justice, OMB number 1125-0006, Executive Office for Immigration Review. Notice of entry of appearance as attorney or representative before the immigration court. Before. Very important term, subliminally recognize there is something that is greater and before the immigration court. What court would that be? That would be the court of our Father which art in heaven. Again, if you want to bring justice, if you want justice, you've got to bring justice. You are the justice. You have to be able to make the appearance as attorney or representative. You have to know the difference between the spiritual and the manual and know that you're the representative, name and address of the represented party, the man known by the first and last name. and that man's supposed address as a resident, which is the record that we're contesting under the public trust expressed therein. Again, it's because this particular national addressing format that we're going to redress it through Homeland Security. And it's a matter of a state recovery through the Health and Human Services at the state level with Social Security Administration, Bureau of Vital Statistics, just like we saw in those memorandums of agreement yesterday. Those are all the people we're going to be getting with. And those memorandums extend even further up the line. Like I said, I've had communications with the Postal Office of Inspector General, the Postmaster, the Postal Board of Governors, the Pentagon, FBI, Secret Service, Interpol, FTC, FCC, IRS. I'm doing my best to let them know there's an error in the record and everybody needs to stop what they're doing and correct them. Says here, attorney or representative, please check one of the following. I am an attorney, so that doesn't apply automatically right away. I am a representative accredited to appear before the Executive Office for Immigration Review as defined in 8 CFR 1292.1A4 with the following recognized organization. I am a law student or law graduate of an accredited U.S. law school as defined in 8 CFR 1292.1A2. I'm a reputable individual. I'm a reputable individual, 5 USC 552A, as we again spoke in that memorandums of agreements yesterday with the SSA. It's the individual record, and the individual's name and number identify the record. And it's under 5 USC and 5 CFR, known as Social Security and Employment. Employee benefits, 20 CFR 422.103. The individual's name and number identify the record. That record is a beneficiary record. Employment beneficiary. Saying that you are employed by the federal government or a contractor contracting with the federal government. I am an accredited foreign government official as defined in 8 CFR 1291.1A5. I am a person who was authorized to practice on December 23rd, 1952 under 8 CFR 1292.1B. So this is the one that most closely identifies with what we're talking about with that Social Security and the supposed beneficiary and the individual's name and identify or name and number identify the record. Pure and simple. So let's take a look at 8 CFR 1292.1, representation of others. This is aliens and nationality. That's the enumeration at birth wherein they confer a United States nationality, which is the gifting of a United States citizenship as a legal name in order to conduct business as an organization under the laws of the United States, but that never develops. No one's ever taught how to develop it in that manner to fully take an oath and a licensure under federal organization laws with the Federal Reserve and the government for acquisitions. Let's look at this. It said 3, reputable individuals. Any reputable individual of good moral character, provided that, so you can't come in the person. Okay, you can't present the legal fiction. You have to come in your good moral character, the spiritual credit. You have to know how to present that. Otherwise, they will beat you. That will make a profit. Those tongues will prosper against you. It's been happening all my life. 94 cases prospering against me because I didn't know the tongue. Now that I know the tongue, it's my moral character that supersedes it. And again, just because there's 94 cases on there doesn't mean I don't have good moral character. It's just that that's never what was presented or represented in any manner, not even through the enumeration at birth, not even my mom and dad presenting any kind of moral character in me. Like I said, that moral character was supposed to have been protected through that name and the process thereof. See, mom and dad are supposed to give you a first name and a second name. The first name is a private name, where they're only calling you that name in the private presence of family and close members of that associative group. The other one is what they give to everybody else outside that group for them to call you. And then, of course, there's an alignment and attachment to something that came prior, before immigration court. Provided that he is appearing on an individual case basis. The authorized representative giving an unambiguous authorized signature on the individual case is therefore not liable for the person named in the individual case. The individual case is the documentation or the instrumentation. Therefore, if you're signing on the instrument, you're therefore not liable for the person named in the instrument at the request of the person entitled to the representation. And the person entitled to that representation is that person in the instrument. And you have a superior right, not at the request of the person entitled, because the person is the documentation. And that documentation using your name in a false manner, a translation of a given name and a family name to a legal name without fully disclosing its proper use up and down the chain of title as it pertains to. That's all those different jurisdictions that we spoke about when they're forum shopping. They know how to use it in those different forums. They know how those forums merge. They know how the records merge. They know how the data elements convert as they merge into different records. They know how that legal name changes. Not all of them, but some of them. And many of them don't even give a rat's ass. They just, and many of them don't even really recognize the change, I guess. It's just the fact that they're doing their job and that's all they're supposed to do. So if all they're supposed to do is just enter the data elements in the machine and let the machine do the rest, then the true fault and correction and remedy is you. Stop putting those data elements into those systems without knowing what you're doing, because they certainly don't either. He is appearing without direct or indirect remuneration and files a written declaration to that effect. Declaratory judgment has nothing to do with the remuneration, has to do with correction of the records, because so far all I've seen the files written are summary judgments, and they're all in error. He has a pre-existing relationship or connection with the person entitled to representation before the immigration court, before it was immigrated, before it was imported. The general journal that had the data elements on it given by my mother to the obstetrician before she gave birth is the issue. It didn't have equal consideration. It was not invested properly. And yet that is the base foundation for all financing operations that are considered to be a fiduciary duty of the government. Provided that such requirement may be waived. Provided that such requirement may be waived as a matter of administrative discretion and for the betterment of the public at large, the general public. If it serves the better interest of the general public than the individual, then they use their administrative discretion of a democracy to say we have control in a democratic society to just lock you up in the insane asylum. In cases where adequate representation would not otherwise be available. This was part of their competency test on me 7 years ago when I stood in there as a belligerent combat. cussing and swearing, calling them all kinds of names, instead of being patient and looking at what was before me and doing my research and studying to shew myself worthy and approved. I was caught up in my emotions. I was the fucking fool. I was the bitch ass slave, throwing things at the wall, hoping something would stick. I wasn't giving adequate representation because I wasn't bringing the adequate representation of the spiritual credit. I do this stuff in private courts, folks, or public courts, folks. His appearance is permitted by the official before whom he wished to appear, namely a special inquiry officer. Remember, I spoke before they can acquire something, they must first inquire as to where they can get it to acquire it. And first, it must be required before they can inquire. Everybody's inquiring without a requirement, saying that it is required, when in fact it's not. It's all voluntary. And that's the beginning of the false process. If it's not required, then they cannot inquire as to acquire. 1, 2, tree, folks. 1, 2, tree. District director, officer in charge. Officer in charge. If he's already in charge, isn't he the one that's got charge? How is he discharging that charge onto someone else? Regional commissioner, the commissioner, or the board. Remember, we spoke about the board. The board of directors is the only one that can hire an attorney to present a suit in that jurisdiction, provided that such permission shall not be granted with respect to any individual who regularly engages in immigration and naturalization practice or preparation. Shall not be granted with respect to any individual who regularly engages in immigration and naturalization practice and preparation, or holds him out to the public as qualified to do so. Never done that. If I'd have known I was practicing, I certainly would have done a better job knowing what I was supposed to be practicing. Again, this is just so profound. It's hard to believe. What do you think, Russ?
I mean, it is. I'm just sitting there looking at all of this and listening, and I don't know how people don't know. I mean, the ones that is obviously pushing all the paperwork. I, I just wish people would get back to the spiritual form, right? They're all going to do a job to push a piece of paper, but they're not protecting the spirit on the paper that they're pushing.
Exactly. That's why we were talking about the letter of the law. They're all following this scrambled colored language known as English without really comprehending what it is and trying to say that they're following the letter of the law, which proves that they're neither following the letter of the law nor the spirit of the law. They're the ones that are going to follow upon that second death in the lake of fire and brimstone. Their spirit is going to be burnt up because it already is.
Well, they're eating themselves up on a daily basis.
Yeah. They're feeding the fuel into the fire because they are the fuel. They don't get it.
Yeah. I sit there and I'm I was listening to all of that today, and I'm like, holy cow! How do these guys not even know? How do you not even know? Maybe Snafu got it there at the last because he kind of got quiet there, so maybe something sunk in on him. They're not adding value out here as far as I'm concerned. Many of them
Nope.
aren't. Many of
Well,
them
no,
aren't.
it's yeah, it's like I said on Paul's. I know what you're talking about. People like that come up, and it's really fascinating. He had like 8 other channels already. He's on his 8th or 9th channel, and supposedly, thousands of subs and everything. And They keep shutting him down because he's going after these mega corporations and really exposing some shit. Yet here he is. I've got 13 viewers, like I mentioned. I don't get great viewership. And yet he's here trying to call me a fraud and expose me for what I am. Okay. Maybe it'll draw up my numbers. I hope, maybe people will see the insanity that he's babbling, know where the real truth really comes from. I'm not here trying to expose anybody but myself. Yeah, I call people bitch ass slaves and fucking fools, and that's only because I see myself in them. And I see a great journey ahead of me because I already see the progress I've made in the last 7 years. You might be astounded at what I see inside of myself. And that's not ego or anything. That's just realizing who we truly are and how we can really affect things if we just change within ourselves. It's not about changing everybody else or changing the world. It's changing ourselves and seeing how we affect the world in that manner. So let's look at the next one. This is table of changes, instructions, Form G28, notice of entry of appearance as attorney or accredited representative. OMB number 1615-0105, 11/24/2017. What is the purpose of this form? Remember, I told you about the national address format, and we already know that DHS is the one that we deal with in regards to redressing the record, as it states in the Constitution, right to redress the grievances. And this is who we're told to redress them with. And that's for misidentification. And that's because we've been misidentified through their traveler program trip. And so it says the U.S. Department of Homeland Security has designated this form as the form on which attorneys and accredited representatives. Now let's point this out, accredited. How is it you are accredited? Because again, like I mentioned, Deuteronomy 15, there comes a certain point in a man's life where he's got to quit being the bitch ass slave, stand up and be the alpha omega or alpha that he is, and lend unto the nation the truth. It takes a real man to stand up on his own and tell people, listen, I'm not going to listen to your bullshit lies anymore. Even your mommy and daddy, when they try to convince you, Keith, the police are your authority. And you know full well better, you better start speaking about that authority. You don't let it loose. Let no tongue prosper against you, rise up against anybody that would place false judgments and condemn them. This is the inheritance of the servants of the Lord, and the righteousness is of me, saith the Lord. That's the only way you can do it, is by using that very righteousness of truth. And this is what we're supposed to lend unto the nations. That's where we get our credence from. That's the spiritual credit, the merits, the ability to be able to prove the meritorious actions of standing firm, because he commanded and it was done. He spake it and it stood fast. And you have to be the act of God and act as such. That's what gives you credence. And the more you start speaking this and the more people hear you, like I said, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Pentagon, FBI, Secret Service, Interpol, all of them have been listening. I don't care if they've been responding. I know they've been listening. My little email counter tells me. I don't need to hear back from them. It tells us again that when you speak that righteousness, they will flee. So that's what I see, is they don't want to touch the subject. So it's going to come down to forcing it into the proper purview, of course, and that's not being belligerent combatant like I spoke of earlier, but just demanding that birthright, force majeure. Accredited representatives provide information to establish their eligibility to appear for and act on behalf of an applicant, petitioner, requester, or respondent in immigration matters. As it relates to the nationality, it is an immigration matter. That's what they're using, those identifications and all of these different programs with the record keeping of individuals that merge here and there is an ability to track both the immigrants and the nationals. They're all subject to documentation. Again, I seek refuge everywhere I go in his house. That's intent. His tent. I am itinerant, sojourner with him, an attorney or accredited representative appearing before Department of Homeland Security. So it's Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, Immigration calendar hearing. Must file Form G28 in each case. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. Remember the memorandum of agreement and stuff we were looking at yesterday? U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Remember the resident determination is under Customs, 19 CF or 19 USC 81O. That's Customs and Border Protection. Remember data elements under 19 CFR. That's another customs code, the Code of Federal Regulations supporting it, wherein the data elements 149.3 says you can use a number in lieu of the name and address if you're buying, selling, or to ship to party. In other words, the one that's receiving the goods for possession and use. That's the benefactor. That's the end of the line, the last mile, final drop off. And U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement will only recognize Form G28 for the appearance of an attorney or accredited representative once the applicant, petitioner, requester, and or respondent has completed, signed, and filed a Form G28. Applicant. The applicant for the assignment of the Social Security number was mom. The applicant for the use of a Social Security card was the one that filled out the SS5 upon turning age 18, upon which that person was already identified by matching up the name and number, which is a legal name with a number for uses in obligations. One was taught how to be using the other side for being accredited. What do you think, Russ? Is that making sense so far? What I spoke about before with the Social Security card being debit on one side, credit on the other?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it all makes. Man, I go back. I mean, I'm fixated on that straight path, and I just don't know how people just don't see it so diligently to be that spiritual foundation in oneself.
Notice it even tells you up here, reason for revision, comprehensive revision, legend for proposed text, black font, current text, purple font equals standard language, red font equals changes. What is the purpose of Form G28? This form is used to establish the eligibility of an attorney or accredited representative to represent an applicant. Again, telling you the applicant is already there. So this is another application to establish. Okay? You see that? This is how you read this English language. This is not to represent an applicant, not the applicant that is establishing the eligibility, but an applicant. And that an applicant is one that you're using this application to establish the eligibility of representing, because the applicant that you're speaking of was the SS5, and it should be aligned to another applicant, which was done by an informant known as mom. That's where the meritorious portion of the documentation is missing. The heralding of the legacy heir is not there. There is no record declaring the merits of the person that was then named and given a legal name, an attachment, as if though that's the merits of the man that took his first breath and became a living soul. Yeah, that's missing.
And that's from day one.
Absolutely.
Day one.
Why I urge people to understand this enumeration at birth. It's not a requirement. It's a statistical record. And they can't force you to be part of a statistical record, which proves to be research. Particularly if they're saying it starts with the SS5, you got to have a social security card in order to get a license so you can drive a car to and from work, so you can get a job, so you can pay taxes, so you can get a better job by going through college to pay your way through college so you can get a better job. This is all fucking insanity, people. You want to either follow the faithful sayings that I will, that thou constantly affirm, that he who believed in God be careful to maintain good works, for these things are good and profitable under man, or do you want to follow the safety and health care of the fictional entity that's telling you they need your data elements for their statistical record so that they can provide some kind of care for you? That's not what it's about. I assure you. Let me see what else I got here.
All right.
Oh, okay. Yeah. One of the things I did before we get on to the next one is I contacted ARP. You guys know who ARP is. American Association of Retired Persons. And guess what? I am a member of AARP. Well, I as a member lodged the person, the legal name, Keith Little, into membership with the American Association of Retired Persons, and have established that record a couple, 2-3 years ago, I think. And so I have this nice little card, and I'll have to renew it at some point. I can't remember when, but I think it's next year. And that's an established record that the person is retired for a number of years. So it's a matter of being able to see how those tongues prosper against you and condemning them. See, when you retire the person, he's no longer allowed to work, right? He's retired. So that's an establishment of a record that initiates a process of correcting the rest of the records that somehow purport that he's still employed and receiving benefits that he's not supposed to be receiving without paying an income tax. Therefore, he's got to get out there and work. That's forced labor. See how that works? Does that make sense?
Ass backwards, as
You
always.
got to use our money to procure many of the things in your life through a doctrine of necessity. And because of that doctrine of necessity is very much mandated and required that you have a job so you can pay income taxes to pay us back in your lifetime. No, that's forced labor. If you think I owe you a debt, then you have to prove that in the scriptural sense. Because again, this is why I don't like people that can't come to me with the spiritual sense. They want to come to me and accuse me of being a man. I've asked people many times, are you a man? And they tell me, yeah. Well, how can you be a man if you accept that Christian scripture for what it is? In Genesis 2:7, it says the very foundation of man is man was formed, God formed man of the dust of the ground. Now, God formed man of the dust of the ground, and he also formed the waters of that ground that would run over the surface of that ground. And the Spirit of God moves upon the face of the waters. and all this, and he created all these things, and then you were cast forth in that womb, and he knew you before he put you in that womb. And then when you took your first breath of life, that man became a living soul. How come nobody wants to recognize that part? They want to recognize them scriptures as if though they believe in those scriptures, but they don't even take um, the sense of the scriptures, because they just read over them as if though, oh, okay, yeah, I'm a
Because they
living
don't
soul.
they
Or I
don't want
was
to be
formed.
responsible.
Yeah, they take somebody else's discernment as if though it's flippant, and don't even look deeper into it. And this is why I urge people that they really, it's disturbing that people, so many young people nowadays seem to walk out the doors of graduating high school and stuff and don't pick up another book. And in a sense, I get that. I get it. They want to be free of all this fucking bullshit that's been pounded down their throat. Another brick in the wall. I can see how they might feel that they've been lineated to do the same thing, and they just want to get out there and experience the world and do different things. And that's a very good thing, I think. But again, if only they had the spiritual connection built in there first. And I think many of them are missing that, and that's why they go out and create all these different jurisdictions in that expressing of freedoms and stuff, and get so actively involved in the protesting and stuff that is just profoundly insane. If you want to support it, that's fine, but to turn around, and it's like this Islam thing and everything. These people, these transgenders and gays that are, yeah, up in arms, yeah, we support it. If you went over there, they'd behead you.
Yeah.
You don't fit in their doctrines, and they don't care if you support it or not. Blatantly going out and being gay and transgender and professing that you're supporting there is blasphemy against them. You fucking ignorant bastards. You just don't get it. So delusional in your mischievous ways of wanting to be some kind of fictional character instead of the real men and women that you were actually created to be. That's blasphemy of the temple. Well, I follow the scripture, and it doesn't say anything about being transgender. Yeah, okay, you want to tear down your temple, cut your weenie off, and that's not desecrating the temple. I don't get it. So the next thing I want to talk about here then, when it comes to the whole purview of what I'm doing, we've spoken on guns to doorknobs and Gary Davis and the World Passport, Diogenes and Jesus Christ and all these other people that live the same kind of lifestyle. And we're talking about perpetual travelers. Those who dwell from time to time here and there as they sojourn with him perpetually, eternally, purveying the very benefit that he receives along the way, the knowledge that he gets from his other brothers and sisters and neighbors as he passes along the way and learns their culture and spreads his. I spoke earlier in Paul's about Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed seems to have been portrayed as this great hero that went around and planted apple seeds, but there's a greater depth to that story in his perpetual traveling and planting those seeds. He liked his cider, and so he is very good at and adept at making his own cider from his dwelling place as he travels from place to place. And so from place to place, he would take his seeds, not just, he didn't plainly just go along the countryside with this huge bag of apple seeds planting apple trees. He went from place to place and he planted apple seeds along the way because he knew in his travels he would one day maybe end up in the back in the same spot and would like to make some more cider again. And that very tree would be the fruits of his own labors. And of course, that's an overwhelming fruit that would provide fruit to other travelers along those very same paths. Again, this is much like you can give a man or feed a man for a day if you give him a fish, but if you feed him to fish or teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. But the true aspect is the knowledge that lasts for years and years and years and generations on down the line. That's the true benefit, the true overwhelming of the cup. A perpetual traveler, also PT, permanent tourist, or prior taxpayer. Did you hear that, Russ?
I did.
Or prior taxpayer.
Prior.
Permanent tourist or prior taxpayer. Does a tourist sound much like somebody that travels? Is this the right way to express your freedom of travel? I mean, I'm a prior taxpayer. I'm not a taxpayer, I'm a prior taxpayer, meaning you've already paid the taxes. No longer owed and due and owing. No longer delinquent. Of portage, of passage, of postage. All of age to do your own thing. A person who bases different aspects of their life in different countries. Why would you base your different aspects of your life in different countries? Well, weren't there 12 fucking tribes? Are we told to follow just one or the basic roots of all of them? Jacob. Did you know Israel isn't a state, a geographical state? It is more a state of mind where you recognize the renaming of Jacob to Israel after he fought his battle with God, after he wrestled with God, the very definition of Israel. Jacob being the one who follows because he came out after Esau. He was the second and followed after Esau, clinging on to his ankle, the Achilles heel of Esau himself. See, the revelation, one of the revelations of Jacob's battle, Jacob's ladder, for me is realizing that I've already paid my fucking dues. Who the fuck are these people to demand more? Again, he commanded and it was done. He spake it and it stood fast. What is done is what ought be done. There is nothing new under the sun. So I speak boldly as I ought to. He is a sojourner with me. He will tell you I've paid my tax. I have repented. And if you find anything in my way that I should repent for again or further, then I will do so. I fear not, for I have been redeemed. He's called me by thy name. I am his. What do I have to fear? Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Principles. Well, let's finish here. Without spending too long in any one place, under the belief that they can reduce taxes, avoid civic duties, and increase personal freedom. Books and services relating to the PT idea have been a staple of the companies that specialize in marketing offshore financial centers, tax avoidance schemes, and personal privacy services. Under the belief that they can reduce taxes and avoid civic duties and increase personal freedoms. That's kind of like that zero thing. I'm a zero. I take nothing away and I give everything I can. This is the same thing that they have in the national parks. You can only camp for 14 days in one campsite. Then you have to get up and move and go somewhere else, even if it's the campsite next door. Principles. The perpetual travel idea proposes that individuals live in such a way that they are not considered a legal resident of any of the countries in which they spend time or operate. By lacking a legal permanent resident status, the theory goes, they may avoid the legal obligations which accompany residency, such as income and asset taxes, social security contributions. If they're contributions, then how are they required? Jury duty. Again, you have to be a voter and part of that association as a resident under the military or civilian services. The idea has been described as a late capitalist nomadism. The idea has been described as a late capitalist nomadism. I'm not a capitalist, I'm a zero. Okay, I'm not capitalizing on anything. I'm doing what I can, where I can, the way I know I best can in my concept, the way I've seen things. And I hope I'm getting better. The flag theory. The perpetual traveler idea has been presented in terms of flag theory, wherein each flag represents one of the legal jurisdictions under which the perpetual traveler operates. The three flags theory is credited to investments pundit Harry D. Schultz, who proposed that everyone should have a second passport and an address in a tax haven, and that their assets should be kept outside their home country. The idea was later expanded to 5 flags to include a place where money was earned and a place for recreation. Where to minimize governmental interference via taxes or otherwise, or to maximize privacy, the theory proposes that each of the following should be in a separate country. Passport and citizenship in a country that does not tax money earned outside the country or control actions. Legal tax residence in a tax haven. Business base where one earns one's money, ideally somewhere with low corporate tax rates. So you would use like a business address, like a corporate building of some sort, or a manufacturing plant. Because that's the only place you would be legally known. Once you walk outside of that building, you are no longer the CEO of the company, even though you wear that hat while you're there in that employment capacity. Once you go home, your mom or your dad, or you're the son taking care of your mom and dad, whatever it is, you wear a different hat once you walk outside that business environment, that business jurisdiction. This is a problem that many people don't understand. You wear more than just the one hat. Asset haven, where one keeps one's money, ideally somewhere with low taxation of passive income and capital gains. Asset haven, where one keeps one's money. Money is not the asset. Money is the collateral paperwork that you derive from the actual asset, whether it be tangible or intangible. See, your intangible assets can only be conveyed through money. That's the documentation, which can always be converted through negotiations known as contracts, negotiable instruments. That's your legal tender today, is negotiable instruments. And you have to know what your true asset is, what your true treasury is. Your true treasury and asset is your spiritual credit, your merits. If you don't know how to fling them around and let the world know, then you're not able to coin your words. So you better purse your lips. Playgrounds where one spends one's money, ideally somewhere with low consumption taxes. These are the supposed excise taxes. You go to the restaurant, you got to pay a local excise tax, 7%, 6%, depending on what state you're in, da 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 da. In 1995, financial commentator Bob Beckman commented about his residence in Monaco. A long time ago, I was told that the most efficient way for an individual to handle his affairs was to work one place, keep his money in a second place, and to live in a third place. I live in Monaco. I don't work here. My money is placed elsewhere, but managed from here. Scope, internet. That's that principal place of business at the residence. That's what they've got you talked into. You're the financial manager. You're the one that's supposed to be doing the financial audits, and you're failing in that financial audit because you don't know the financial terms. And this is why I say they never taught us these financial terms and the capacity we're placed in. So we don't know it, and we're the ones actually entering the false data elements. Once we recognize that, we can fix that. We can do that in peace. We don't have to be so pissed about it like I was. And again, I'm not posing that I'm not going to get over being pissed. It took me a long time to figure it out because of all the things that have been that have happened in my life. This stuff permeates every corner of your life. That's why when I realized how simple it was, it's really not that simple. Again, that English language, it's amazing. but you have to do some deep digging to see it. And once you do, it opens your eyes to how everything's connected. Everything. There are so many things that are so synonymous. Yes, minimum contacts. And you realize how to avoid those minimum contacts by using those data elements in the proper way so they don't get routed through state contacts. They get routed all the way up and down the line so nobody can interfere in them. That way, when they go out, they come back. Anyway, that's the last I wanted to point out was that itinerant part, because that's what we're supposed to be, folks, in my earnest opinion. And granted, there are places for communities, but again, like I said, they're not supposed to be these huge, explosive communities that just tear up the environment. That's the true problem. And those societal communities have gotten so large and overwhelming and thrown things out of balance and out of cycle and out of kilter that I think more people need to get back to the natural, inherent nomadness that we're supposed to experience. And it goes to the same thing with this diurnal thing. I don't think we're really diurnal people either. I think we're supposed to, again, when it comes to the cycles of balance, experience both. And I'm telling you, folks, my night times in the mountains, when I was able to see the fluorescent life on a nice clear night where there was no moon and it was pure darkness, you could see the fluorescent light on the earth floor. It was amazing. And until you get out there and have that experience, you don't know how amazing it is. You don't know how amazing it is to be able to live off the land and not have to worry about stores and warehousing things and carrying so much with you. You can carry as a minimalist and enjoy life so much more. It's amazing. Of course, many people won't see that. They become so indoctrinated into the convenience and comforts of these lifestyles of sitting there watching this boob tube and watching somebody else's life. Their life is so amazing. It's amazing. Anyway, you got anything, Russ?
No, not at all.
All right. Well, I again appreciate everybody's support. I want to thank everybody for showing up and hitting that like, share, and subscribe button if you haven't. There's PayPal links in the detail section below for anybody that wants to share some love. Again, I can always use it. 10, 15, 20, 30 bucks, whatever. And of course, you know I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back or not. So may God bless you. Have a good night, and we'll see everybody again next time. Bye now.